Good afternoon and welcome to today's panel discussion, The New Normal, How to Securely Enable Hybrid Work and Lessons Learned from 18 Months of Remote Work. My name is Jon Swartz. I'm a senior reporter at Dow Jones and I will be your moderator today. I'm excited to moderate today's panel with a star power lineup that includes Dave Dewalt, who needs no introduction, but just in case, he's the former CEO of FireEye, McAfee, and now is the CEO/founder of venture capital firm NightDragon. We also have recovering hacker Alissa Knight, who is a partner at Knight Incorporated, and Ofer, the CEO and founder of Illusive. Welcome to all of you. Today's discussion will reflect on the chaos that emerged in the last 18 months. It might be better suited to be titled Remote Work Gone Wild. The mandate to shelter in place has catalyzed a greater technological paradigm shift than a decade of digital transformation. Remote workers are using personal devices on home networks to assess third-party applications. How exactly are security teams supposed to obtain visibility into this access, let alone control it? The approaches to maintaining and securing remote work are just as divided as the opinion on whether employees should return to the office. But with major organizations such as Oracle, Google, and Apple now reconsidering or pausing the decision to return to physical offices, remote work is a trend that is here to stay. With more than a year of experience under our belts, I think we can all agree that the chaos that has emerged since our ransomware attacks, SolarWinds, kids distance learning, and Zoom bombing has changed the world forever. Today, we will discuss the most common mistakes enterprises have made in securely enabling their remote workforce, how organizations can improve their remote work securely, and preventative strategies to make sure employees don't become low-hanging fruit for attackers. Before we start with our questions, I'm going to just offer a couple of quick logistics. Please submit your questions in the chat area. Also, a recorded version of this session, of this webinar, will be available on demand via Illusive. So let's start with our first question. I'm going to throw it out to everybody because it's a pretty broad question. So looking back to early 2020, how prepared were organizations to make the switch to remote work? For instance, what obstacles were in the way and what were the biggest mistakes that organizations made? Let's start with Ofer.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me, first of all. I would say not very. On the surface of it, things continued to work and work supposedly well. I mean, we were equipped to transition to work from home, digital transformation, all that good stuff got us off to a working state. So we made it work. That's the good side of it. But did we actually make it work securely? And I would argue that we didn't. We kind of hit the ground running, saying, what do we need in order to allow our employees to actually operate? What are the basics needed so that they can run their business? But what we haven't adapted or done a great job is figuring out how is the threat landscape changing and shifting over time and adapting our security in accordance. And that's a moving target, and it's moving every day and every week, and attackers are adapting to this new norm. And I think the biggest mistake that I've seen is that organizations pretty rapidly felt they were done. They kind of got things running, saw that the world didn't fall apart, said, great, we can mark a check there and we're good. But that's not reality. Reality is that it's changing very, very rapidly, and we've got to stay up to speed with the threat landscape as it is today.
Yeah, I agree. John, I'll expound on what Ofer was saying. One of the things that I found and discovered very early on was a lot of organizations didn't even have enough VPN licenses to be able to allow the entire workforce to work remotely. They usually had like a small pool of licenses for people that were authorized to VPN in. So they weren't even prepared for that. A lot of organizations didn't have enough laptops to issue to every employee to work from home. So a lot of employees were using their home workstations until the company could get procurement out to be able to get them a laptop. And increasing this attack surface were organizations that didn't even have a VPN in the first place. And so what they did was, if the VPN was overly saturated or they didn't have enough licenses, John, they were spinning up RDP servers. And a lot of these ransomware gangs, and I actually just published a paper called Ransomware Inc. for Illusive, talking about this very thing. A lot of the ransomware crime syndicates were targeting RDP servers because so many schools, so many organizations, so many healthcare organizations were just spinning up RDP servers to give employees remote access to the network.
Wow. Wow. That's
Jon,
scary.
this is Dave. Maybe, sorry if I could jump in there too for a second. Alissa, first of all, I'm really jealous of your studio back there. I've got to figure out how to, lights flashing. There's like evil
Thank
people
you
in the background. I'm like, wow, I see you close up. Anyway, good to
Thanks,
see
Dave.
you. And Jon and
Good to see you
Ofer,
too, Dave.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks for having me too. Jon, I really loved your opening. I really kind of believe this state that we've been in with all these crises have been really interesting the last 20 months or so, just in the world. And, this whole panel here was exciting for me just because I think, remote work in general was like a novelty at the time of this crisis because nobody was really prepared for it. And Alissa, you were just saying it, right? Do we have laptops? Do we know how to VPN in? Do we understand the home attack surface? And we went from this massive pivot. I remember like it was yesterday, March 8, 2020, like our whole world changed from everybody coming into the office to everybody working from home. Like it was like binary, completely changed. And then all of a sudden we started to reintroduce some sort of hybrid of the two. Let's get some people back into the office, some people working from home. And then we have another variant and now we're all back home again. And then it's been a really fascinating world, at least from a CEO and board member down visibility. And what's that created? In my mind, it's created the ultimate opportunity if you're a bad guy, right? I mean, the Russian playbook, they figured this out. I mean, hate to say the Chinese playbook too, but absolutely the ransomware playbook the same way. And what's this all resulted in? It's the highest threat levels we've ever seen in the cyber market in the 20 years I've been in the market. So, that's the state of play we're in right now, whether we like it or not. We have a very difficult environment to defend when you have a home and, almost millennials now who don't even have a home, they're traveling, they're transitioning. How do you manage security in that world? I have a lot of empathy for CISOs in a lot of ways who have to do this, but it's an interesting world for sure. And it looks like we're not out of that, problem yet. And we may have many months to go as companies still try to figure out, do I work from home? Do I work from the office? Do I work from both? Which shift goes in? How do I do this? How global can I be with my employee base? And almost every CEO is struggling with how to manage that, both culturally as well as emotionally, to bring their employees together and like they're used to doing. So a lot of challenges in leadership and a lot of challenges that companies have to figure out. But one thing I have learned is adversity is the test of true leadership. And some winners have really come out of this amazingly strong and some haven't. And it's just amazing to watch, periods of crises when good companies get great and bad companies get worse. And, that's how I summarize anyway. Sorry for the passionate plea.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you said. It's a good tee up to the next question we have, which is with more than a year of experience under our belts, what are the biggest gaps between what the attackers know about the attack surface and what security teams know? And maybe we could start off with Alissa on that.
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned before, even the defenders had to adapt to this new norm, right? And so do attackers, right? So the thing is that at least from what I've been experiencing and been involved with since the pandemic started and the work from home mandate and shelter in place started, was attackers were now starting to go after a different target, right? So you have this entire communication infrastructure that's been largely unprotected, right? Being able to go after a company's employees through social media and these other attack vectors where they're not in the corporate network because they're sitting at their desk in the office where there's a network detection response solution or deception technology or whatever in place. People don't have a security budget at their house. People don't have a home security budget, right? They'll implement whatever their home router will give them, if they've even changed the default password. So I think hackers have adapted as well to this new norm. going after targets through social media, through communication platforms. We saw a very large company who I won't mention just got hit through Slack. So there's all these communication platforms that are being used to be able to support this remote work environment, for these companies to be able to still feel like there's collaboration going on, and all of these other platforms that are largely unprotected, because you can send files through a communication platform that employee can download and run, and it's not going to go through the corporate secure email gateway. It's not going to go through the corporate NDR. And so you have these basically an expanded attack surface as a result of this. And like Dave mentioned, I agree. I feel sorry for the CISO who previously had to secure the cloud environment and secure the internet. Now they have to secure people's home networks too, and worry about that, and worry about Jane gaming on the home network with the split tunnel VPN into the corporate network. So there's all these, I would say that the attack surface has definitely expanded and not ebbed.
Yeah, to add to that, Alissa, I think you made some critical points here, and to me, the underpinning of this whole thing is adaptation, right? The attack surface, absolutely, couldn't agree with you more. It's changed a lot over the last year and a half. Thing is, it will continue to change over the next year and a half. And as Dave mentioned, are we working from home? Are we working in the office? Are we doing 1 week this thing and then another week we have a totally different strategy? And we can't assume that we know and it's going to be a stable state now for the foreseeable future. It's continually adapting and such. And I think in security, we've always felt that security is somewhat of an afterthought, right? Many CISOs are kind of running after the business. The business is moving forward. They're trying to run behind, clean up all kinds of stuff that was left behind and figure out kind of how to secure whatever has already been done. That doesn't work anymore. We have got to be embedded as part of that change and just find the nimble and lightweight ways to be as quick as the attackers are, because there's an adaptation for them as well, but they tend to move a whole lot faster than we have as a defense industry. And we've got to start to match that pace. Otherwise, we stand no chance.
Yeah.
And by the way, Ofer, you and Alissa both hit on something I thought was interesting. In the last couple of months, I've talked to two former heads of countries' offensive commands, and both of them, universally said this was the greatest opportunity as an attacker we've seen in decades, right? Or the time of cyber domain, because of what you're just saying. And think about it from the attacker's point of view, and Alissa, this way better than me, but I mean, attacks have become highly individualized, right? And this isn't quantity-based attacks. Let's send a spearfish out to 10,000. This is let's go after the administrator at home. Let's go after that highly coveted individual. And now with them working at home and all the new social media platforms and other shared cloud platforms, however that might be, all the things you said, Alissa, I mean, boy, has this game gotten easier. And if you're a chief security officer, you have to think about securing that home. You have to, because that's where they're working. And by the way, they're not just working from the home, they're working from the Starbucks. They're working from, the kids' soccer field. They're working from wherever they happen to be, because we became work from everywhere and anywhere, not just from the home now. So it's a really different game now that we have than we used to, or just defend the network. Yeah.
It's funny, for the last 2 decades, I've been working with companies and doing these tabletop exercises of, okay, this server just got hit with ransomware and this person just got hit with malware. And what do you do? And ISO 27001 requires this every year. PCI requires this. We have all these, regulations that require these tabletop exercises and walking through the motions. So when it does actually happen, you know what to do. I don't recall in the last 20 years ever doing a pandemic exercise. And so that underscores a huge problem too with the standards. It's, but I mean, it definitely brought up things like, oh my God, we don't have enough laptops. So people are going to have to use their home workstations and let them, give them access. And also one other thing I forgot to mention was a lot of these organizations were still on single factor authentication. There's a lot of companies that still don't have MFA and it's 2021, so it created a huge problem.
So this is just like just a number of sleepless nights and headaches for executive teams. I wonder if whether the CEOs are more concerned with security or productivity given these times. And who do you think had the harder job, the CIO or the CISO? I'll start with Dave.
Hmm.
Well, boy, I hate to throw the CIO or the CISO under the bus in ranked order there, because I have a lot of empathy. Well, I will tell you this, and for those listening to this, I mean, being a CEO during that last window, depends what vertical industry you were in, but it was very hard to be a leader in the last 18 months of a major company. And I'm on the board of a Fortune 50 company in the travel industry. Let's say the first thing we try to do is survive. And, just what do we have to do just to survive this pandemic? And, security and productivity wasn't top of mind, I'll just say. Survivability was top of mind. We were losing 100 million a day at one point. We were furloughing employees left and right. I mean, we were barely able to get planes in the air, to even do things. So, but the silver lining that came out of all of this was, like I said earlier, it's a test of true leadership. The amount of inertia we had to cloud modernize our applications, our ability to really build a flex architecture into our IT during this pandemic would have never happened without the pandemic. And it forced us to survive. And what that created was forcing us to modernize at a much, much faster pace. And this was true of all the industries got hit hard. The hotel and leisure industry was clearly one, but a lot of the brick and mortar retailers had to modernize fast to commerce. And there's so many good things that came out of all of that too. And I think there's a lot of heroes out there with CIOs and CISOs who really had to move almost 5, 7, 10 years of workload into 18 months and did so. And did so with a remote IT organization, remote security operation, while the attackers were finding the greatest opportunities. So yeah, we had a lot of breaches, and yeah, we saw some of them in the headlines. But having said that, all in all, knocking wood here, it was, credit to a lot of the chief security officers and CIOs who took advantage of that window and thrived in it too. So anyway, my pride coming out at some of the companies I'm part of who, ended up a lot stronger. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of statement. So this was one of those.
Yeah, lately I've seen a short post that says whatever doesn't kill you mutates and tries again. But but if we put that aside, I would agree with Dave 100%. I mean, I think now that we're a year and a half in, we kind of forgot that at the beginning of this pandemic and the transition to work from home, all of the leaders were kind of trying to figure out, are we even going to be able to operate the business? And certainly Dave mentioned, I mean, major airline, clearly like right in the line of fire, but alongside that was every other company as well. I can tell you from our own experience at Illusive, March, April last year, we had all of the developers home and we were like, can we still develop products effectively and efficiently? Can we get things out the door at the quality that we're accustomed to and make sure we support our customers in the best way? Is that all going to work? And it wasn't clear. So I would agree 100%. Everybody was focused on, can we actually run the business? And then as the second thought, it was, okay, so how have things changed? What do I need to do now in order to secure it in a better way? If I go back to my opening comment, my concern when I look at the industry is that we kind of went through those two phases. We figured out, great, the business is working. We did some things to better secure it. And then we kind of stopped. I'm exaggerating a bit, but we kind of stopped. And we said, it works, it's secure, it's all good. The attackers are not taking any time off. They are changing. They're seeing how these things are modifying in the world, and they're succeeding in doing so. And we've certainly seen our share of attacks right over these last couple of years here, because they're adapting well. And so it's an ongoing effort for us, I think.
By the way, don't forget, a lot of people forget this, and it's worth reminding everyone, not only has your attack surface changed dramatically with all this remote work, but the attackers now have the blueprint to your entire attack surface. And how did they get that? Through the SolarWinds breaches, right?
Yeah.
Don't forget what companies got breached during that time frame. Some of the best red team pen testing organizations in the world with the greatest blueprints to the enterprise. Now we're in the hands of nation states that basically can, basically has a blueprint on how to get in. So this is what we're up against, not just a bar where our attack surface has changed. We're up against a bar where a nation state has a lot of that blueprint of your attack surface completely identified. So what does that mean? That means that the outer shell is going to get breached at some point. It's going to happen. This becomes an east-west game. It becomes a lateral movement game. Can you detect the attacker once they're in? How do we detect the attacker once they're in? What tools do we need to put in place? That's why I'm always passionate about talking about Illusive here, but this is really an area that companies have to focus on. I'm sure everybody read mobile. What happened there? That attacker was able to move around east-west for a long period of time without really getting caught. And so you just got a different situation now than we had before with all the things I said.
Yeah, I agree. And even as defenders, we need to definitely adapt to. I mean, it's the one thing I'm always saying about Illusive is, there's the exploits may change, where the employees work from will change. All of these things change, but the one thing that always stays the same, that is always static, is lateral movement. The weapons they use, the exploits they use, those will always evolve and change. You go after softer targets, you go after the human, but there will always be the beachhead and there will always be lateral movement. You don't have to create a signature for that.
It seemed as if there was a year of the attackers were bypassing or outright evading perimeter controls at will. They were more easily getting in. What are defenses missing, or what needs to be done to address that issue? I'll start with Ofer.
Sure. Well, I'll share what we see a lot. In 99.90% of the attacks, what is an attacker trying to do once they got initial access to anywhere? It doesn't matter if it's somebody working at home or on their corporate network. They're trying now to get some form of a privileged account, right? They're after an identity. And can I get a strong identity? And if I can do so, now I can utilize that to basically go anywhere and do anything. And as long as I'm careful and not overly noisy, then I'll be successful in my attack. What we're seeing throughout the world is that we're doing a pretty poor job at protecting our identities. We're seeing, credentials stored everywhere. We're seeing mismanaged permissions. We're seeing all of this stuff that just makes the attacker's life so much easier. And this is not a necessity at all. We can do a better job in a very significant way. And I would urge companies, if there's something you want to make sure you're really good at, is protect your identities. Make sure you're not giving the attackers those keys to the kingdom, which are bluntly and very clearly are way too easy to get today. Way too easy. And we've got to do a better job at that.
I can't agree more, Ofer, right? I mean, like a lot of companies, you realize, what's the attacker after? Those identities and the identities of the most valuable personnel in your company. And then you got to ask yourself, what are the most valuable personnel in the company? And 9 out of 10 people will say, well, that's my system administrators. That's maybe some of my top security people who have the most credentials. But you got to remember what the attackers are after. Maybe that person works in finance and is the controller of the financials, or the CFO, or somebody in investor relations. What are the attackers after there? They're after financial information so they can trade on the stock based on news. Or perhaps they're running the backup and recovery systems, and they're not even in security. They're not even a system admin. Ransomwares are after them. So you got to start thinking differently a little bit too about what individuals you need to protect, and then how those identities need to be protected, and how careful you need to be with those identities. And to what Alissa said earlier, it's not just, do you even have two-factor authentication on it? So first of all, you better have multi-factor authentication, but you also should have anomaly behavior on that as well, like a UBA type tool too. So there's multi-layers of defense on that as well, and important here.
Yeah, Dave, I agree. I think we as defenders always typically try and go right towards protect the domain admin, protect the enterprise admin. And here's the thing, our systems are caching credentials. The domain admin logs into, the receptionist computer. Those credentials are cached in memory. You've got connection cached in the system. The whole concept of attack surface management, right? And the problem is that we're all too quick to try and protect and put a bubble around the super users, the admins. But you can still, if you get that foothold, you can carve all of that other stuff out of memory and you just move around the environment, live off the land. So, I think I agree with you. I think we're trying to place too much emphasis in protecting the privileged user accounts, when in fact we should be not trusting everyone. I'm a big believer in zero trust network. Hell, it's 2021. Companies still have flat networks. You can still reach every asset if you have a beachhead in most networks, because there's no microsegmentation, there's no deception, there's nothing. It's all one big flat network, and you can communicate with everything once you have a foothold.
Yeah, listen, and I'm happy you brought up that point, because to attest to that, we see that everywhere. We'll see a domain admin cred lying around we'll kind of take the best of both worlds between what you and Dave mentioned, but see a domain admin account on a finance person's machine, and then, well, a lot easier to get to the finance person's machine, but then immediately as an attacker, I become this privileged user and whoopee, I got it all. I can go anywhere I want. Alongside that, I'll add maybe a final comment with Dave, as you mentioned, different people and personas. One of the things that we see a lot of our customers is figuring out, what do I do with the DevOps people? Because suddenly it's now, they're not a traditional IT admin, but effectively they're an IT admin of a certain portion of the environment. They own a certain piece of the cloud environment, and they can, do great things or wreak havoc. It depends on who has access to it. And yet you look at some of the more traditional tools that we've used, for example, privileged access management around IT administrators, well, they don't fit really well with the work style and working behavior of a DevOps person. So how do we go about that? And how do we ensure that if we have these new types of people that have this access, how do we just make it harder for the attacker to imitate those people, to basically get a hold of those identities? And there's certainly ways to do so.
For an attacker, is it easier or harder to attack a remote workforce? And what might an attack look like on a remote workforce, Alissa?
Yeah, I definitely, because I use this in my previous breaches and penetration tests. I would say the answer is for sure easier, right? Because like I said, the person working at home doesn't have the same level of security controls in place that if they were working out of their cubicle in a cubicle farm in an office, right? There's all these layers of defenses coming from the internal network out to protect the edge, the internal network, and the data. Hopefully there's DLP, stuff like that. But the home user, the home worker doesn't have those things. And in many cases, a lot of the organizations, in the forensic incident response investigations I've been doing, we're having people send their personal equipment out to be forensically examined because they weren't using a corporate laptop. They were using their home machine. So, it's definitely easier. And the advent of this migration to the cloud and digital transformation strategies, and companies sort of abandoning their server room and decommissioning their server racks in order to move to EC2 workloads in the cloud, or, it's really opened up this expanded attack surface where I can go after an employee through LinkedIn, or go after them through Facebook, or go after them through another site that doesn't have security controls around what files I can transfer to them, because it's not going to hit that corporate secure email gateway or any of the other controls that might be at the home office. So it's definitely easier. And you have more targets, you have more people you can go after because of the use of these communication platforms. A lot of organizations open up their Microsoft Teams chat server to the public, or their Slack channel, Slack server up to the public. And it's really easy to be able to social engineer targets at companies through these methods that would have otherwise been firewalled off from inside the network.
Alissa, you and I have talked about this at Black Hat, but
Yeah.
it always amazes me when, talk to someone like you. It's like, oh, wow, well, let's just look on LinkedIn and see who the administrators are. Oh, wow, they put their cell phone and their personal email right in LinkedIn. Oh, by the way, here's 5 of their friends who work at the company too. Here's their emails.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, here's Instagram, here's Twitter. Yeah.
It's the perfect recon tool.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
5 minutes later, you had the entire IT org mapped out. Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest breaches that I went through, where I actually, and I talked about this in my previous chat with Dave at Black Hat, was, I had actually compromised a network where there were robots in the warehouse moving things around. And I was actually able to compromise and breach that network and take control of those robots. And it was because I actually social engineered one of the employees through LinkedIn. And I was lucky enough to see that the manager came in and actually wrote a recommendation for that employee and then had the manager's name. So it was really easy to then, fish that individual and, create a custom tailored email. Hey, this is your employee evaluation report, open it, and it's a weaponized PDF file. And a lot of these third-party sites don't check files as they're being sent to people through P2P. You've got all these controls, the luxury of controls when you're inside a network and it's going through your corporate email. But if you're using a third-party communication site, and you're sending files back and forth, a lot of times those third-party sites aren't scanning files.
I'm going to go to something Alissa mentioned. There's been a lot of talk information in cloud migration over the past decade, and a lot of movement by companies in that direction. How much of an impact did these trends have on remote work and kind of the whole bigger picture security? Dave, I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, John, it had a huge impact. I mentioned, I won't mention their name, but large airline, we'll just say, recognizable. I might have this number off by 1 or 2, but we did over 690 applications cloud modernized during the pandemic. And this represented almost 90% of all the applications the company had. And the result of it was now we have an entire new way that we're working with, all the advantages that the cloud brought us, both, private cloud instances, public cloud, and hybrid of them. But having said that, the entire security model changed too, not just because of remote workers logging in a different way, but also what we had to protect in what parts of the cloud infrastructure and how lateral movement could occur across those apps. And new things like cloud posture management and cloud detection and response, and many, many different types of things that we had to monitor and manage from our SOC and from our managed security SOC providers that we had. And so it just created a whole new change in a very quick period of time. As I mentioned earlier, normally this would have taken us years to modernize this many apps this fast. But necessity created a scenario for us that we had to react, and we had to react fast. But ultimately, the security model changed as a result of all of that. And on top of that, the amount of personnel changed a lot too. And that's what people don't realize too, is, some of the companies who did really well were hiring like mad. Some of the ones who did really poorly were laying off like mad, then bringing them back in. So all that personnel change of onboarding and offboarding and onboarding created a lot of identity management challenges as well, especially in light of all the modernization that was happening. So pretty interesting times. And, again, I give credit for security professionals who really navigated these waters well, but I still warn them that, we're not out of it yet. So, a lot more here.
Yeah, and one thing. Sorry, Ofer. One thing I did want to add in there was another thing that I'm finding is pretty systemic across all of the organizations is, again, the single factor authentication. But a lot of organizations are actually authenticating individuals, but they're not authorizing them. So, we as defenders need to understand that you really need to combine authorization with authentication, and authentication is something you are, something you have, something right? That's authentication, but authorization is, yeah, I'm authenticated, I'm allowed to be here, but am I authorized to be requesting the data that I'm requesting, or authorized to be accessing the systems or the file shares that I'm trying to access? And a lot of organizations forget that part. They forget about the authorization part. And that's another problem that manifested itself in this whole pandemic.
I'm curious to get your thoughts, Dave. When I think about the change that we've seen over this last year and a half, is that we were kind of fortunate. It's funny to talk about the pandemic as being fortunate, but we were fortunate that it happened at this time, because likely if this had happened, 10, 12 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to adapt that quickly. And we would have had very different, I think, ramifications. And at least in my mind, that's because we were already on the path to kind of cloud migration and digital transformation. It started and it was moving. It wasn't going nearly as quickly as it is now, but it was moving in that direction. And then, to your point, necessity kind of expedited everything. But had we not even been on that trajectory, I feel like we wouldn't have been able to make that shift, from the get-go. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think, the problem is it's the same old story year after year after year. We're always reacting. We as defenders are always reacting to things that are occurring or things that have cropped up or changed. I wish we would stop being so reactive and start being more proactive, because it's just the same thing over and over and over again. We're always quickly trying to react to something new, and I think it gives us less of a strategic position.
There was a question that came over. We touched on VPNs earlier, and I just want to address this to you. It's from Seth Dawson. He was wondering, are VPNs soon to be obsolete due to the connectivity and security concerns with rerouting network traffic back to the company's data center? And if so, what is the next step in securing employees for this workplace transformation?
Oh man. Okay, so I'm going to weigh in here. As many of my followers know, I'm very opinionated. I'm going to say something that may upset some people, or people may disagree with. I do believe that that the window on VPNs are starting to close. I think, if you look at just VPNs in general, the industry, virtual private networks in general, there hasn't really been a lot of innovation or changes in that industry law. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much the same players that have pretty much just been still kind of hanging around. They've been integrated into the firewalls themselves, like your Palo Alto Networks of the world, where, okay, I've got the firewall and I'll just, add the VPN capability in. There really isn't much disruption happening in that space. I think software-defined networking, SDN and SDP and all that stuff is really changing this. And I have been seeing a lot of companies moving from VPNs to more software-defined networking and technologies. I think with more and more data and everything moving to the cloud, let's all be honest. Let's point the pink elephant out in the room, right? The castle and the moat that whole architecture is gone. The castle has left the moat. Right. So this whole defense in depth and trying to secure the data in the corporate network, it's gone. It's everywhere. It's on people's mobile devices and BYOD. It's in the cloud. It's in SaaS platforms. It's everywhere. And the idea that we can try and control that or secure it in place is gone. So yes, I agree with the person who asked that question. I think that with how much has transformed and moved to the cloud with everything in SaaS platforms now, there really isn't a reason anymore for people to VPN into the corporate intranet. Really, what's left there anymore? Everything's in file servers or Dropbox or cloud drives or, ServiceNow. I mean, nothing's in the intranet anymore. So, it's why a lot of these companies have started to move to this permanent work from home and, just, hey, giving access to these different cloud sites that they can log into and tying it in with Okta and multi-factor and single sign-on and all this stuff is happening. I think that organizations that are still developing technologies just for the corporate intranet and have not made that move to cloud, secure cloud workloads, Docker containers within Kubernetes, and virtualization and all that stuff that's happening out in the cloud, I think that their days are being quickly numbered. I think that if, as a CISO, and again, I may get my car keyed for saying this, but as a CISO, I don't talk very publicly about this, but I'm CISO for a bank. And one of the things that I did in my NDR project is I went out there when I was buying an NDR and I said, okay, if you only work on the internal on-prem network, I'm going to eliminate you from my review, because guess what? We're shutting down all of our branches. We're shutting down all of our offices. We're moving totally digital. We're not going to have a corporate intranet anymore. Everyone's going to be working from everywhere. And so I want something that will support my cloud environments, a hybrid cloud, a multi-cloud environment. I'm not just in AWS. I'm in AWS. I'm in Azure. I'm in Google Cloud. I'm in all of these different distributed cloud workloads and cloud infrastructures. And you need to be able to support that. And I think that these technologies that are just designed to run in the intranet, I don't know if they have a future very long.
Melissa, can't agree more. And I even make it more profound. I talk about this last period of time with the pandemic. I called it the big shift, because in all my years, I watched incremental change to the network topology. And in the last 18 months, we watched an exponential change to that network topology for all the things you just said. We had MPLS networks for the most part. Yeah, we had some SD-WAN breakouts occurring for branch offices, and boom, here we are delivering cloud networking as a service. We have SASE and secure access service edges now, and that edge is everywhere. And suddenly the whole cloud fabric has changed for your network. And how do we secure that network? What do we do? And older technologies that are really based off MPLS or even SD-WAN, I believe, are obsoleting faster, because the longer this remote work environment occurs, the faster the big shift happens. And the more we move, some of the hottest companies I see in all of technology are now cloud networking as a service companies. The entire network is in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting changes fast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Do you remember, Dave, like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, CTOs, infrastructure and operation, were like, no more agents, no more agents. They would go to the CISO and say, if you buy another product that has an agent-based architecture, I'm not putting it on any of the workstations and laptops anymore. No more agents. Now, what are they saying? They're singing a different tune. It's, you have to have agents, because how are you going to get visibility into that home users, that person working from their home? You can't, so I think we're starting to sort of just re-engineer ourselves and redefine that technology stack, where you need to be nimble. You need to have something, you need to have eyes and ears everywhere, because data is everywhere and people are everywhere.
By the way, I'm smirking a little bit because I was CEO of McAfee back then, and my entire mantra was single agent, single console, because everybody was tired of agents, and we're sort of back to the future a little bit with all of that.
We got in the DeLorean.
Exactly.
The one thing I think we've got to make sure, though, is that I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, so much is happening in the cloud, and the attacks are starting to move that way. With that said, I think it's going to be certainly for the larger companies, it's going to be a hybrid world in the long run. I think that we're going to see, it's like anything else. It's a pendulum shift, right? So now there's a lot of focus in the cloud. We're moving everything to the cloud, putting all our attention there. The attackers are also going to adapt to all of their modifications there. And that's still very much in its early days today. And yet we're going to have all kinds of crown jewels and important assets where eventually we'll want to keep them close to us, not expose them to employees by other companies and all kinds of other concerns that come off of that. And essentially we'll have to be thinking about one way to secure both environments, or the hybrid environment in conjunction, because certainly there's a lot of great innovation happening to look at cloud as a standalone capability. And that's good for this time, but eventually, as CISOs won't be able to take one set of technologies to protect your cloud environment, and then in a parallel set to protect your on-prem environment. We've got to have it consolidated and kind of covering the full thing at once. So I think that's where it'll eventually land. It'll be a mix between the two, and we have to make sure we don't take our eye off the ball. By the way, in that regard, you guys mentioned SolarWinds earlier. probably the most profound of attacks that utilize the on-prem cloud connectivity, right? And if I can get access to one, how do I use that to get access to the other environment? So that's a whole trend I think we're going to see a lot of in the years to come.
Yeah, and I should qualify my statement. I do want to make it clear that obviously not every organization in every industry is going to get rid of their intranet. I'm just saying, like, obviously hospitals still need a corporate intranet and internal network. And healthcare, healthcare. There's obviously organizations that will still need to maintain that I guess legacy, if you will. Eventually it'll be legacy architecture. But I agree with you, Ofer. If in maintaining that, they're still going to have a hybrid environment with cloud environments and cloud workloads and SaaS platforms, because no one wants to run their HRMS and their internal network anymore. Nobody, everything is all pretty much SaaS now. So, I mean, but there is going to be that internal network that good technology providers are still going to need to be able to support.
Looking ahead, it seems like the jury's still out, still deliberating on whether to return to the office and when. How much do you think is driven by some of these challenges of remote work? What sort of priorities, for instance, should CEOs be considering to help manage this transition, Ofer?
Well, first of all, I'd say, following Alyssa's comment earlier, I think that the attack surface has just changed so dramatically. And I think that the kind of gist of it is that it's just not well defined. There is no clear, we used to think about the attack surface as a surface, right? We had this bubble of our organization, we had the insides, and then there was this surface we needed to protect. That's no longer the case with different accessibility and different applications and different locations and so on and so forth. So that's a moving target, and that's not going to be stable anytime soon. That's going to continue to shift and change. And so I think the things organizations have to think about is cyber hygiene. I think it'll really go back to, if the attack surface is basically everywhere and attackers can access all kinds of machines in all kinds of places, how do I make sure I don't leave opportunities for attackers? And it sounds basic and trivial, but you'd be surprised how much of a gap we have there in the world. It's huge.
Yeah. Ofer, I'll admit it. I'll call a spade. I know everyone knows I'm drunk on the Illusive Kool-Aid. So here's why. Look, I create content for cybersecurity vendors. And one of the things that my mantra is that I live by is that I like security controls that address the cause, not the symptom. And there's a lot of security controls and technologies out there that exist that are trying to address the symptom, right? When you go to the doctor, you don't go to the doctor and say, "Hey, doc, can you fix this cough?" No, you're going to the doctor's trying to find out what's causing the cough. Right? Why are we creating technologies addressing the symptoms? Why not go after the cause? And that's what I love about the Illusive technology stack, is it addresses the cause, right? What are the huge thing? Attack surface management, right? So that's addressing the cause of, credentials being stored in cache or connection history being stored on a machine. If you can take those, you can use those. So let's get rid of them. Let's eliminate it. Let's know what we're trying to protect. You cannot protect what you don't know you have. I'll say that till I'm blue in the face. And the thing is that a lot of organizations, if you look over in history, look at the Equifax breach. Oh, we didn't know about that Tomcat server. Oh, it wasn't part of the patch management strategy. It wasn't being patched. You can't. All these organizations that have been popped because of assets they didn't know were out there, or didn't know about, or credentials they didn't know were being stored on a machine, or it's attack surface management. It's addressing the cause. It's going back to basics, just like you said. It's about addressing and going back to the hygiene.
I would even elevate the conversation a little bit for a second, because I think it's important when this whole panel's here talking about remote work. I mean, think about what's coming too, in the next couple of year window. The world is in such a race for talent right now, particularly in certain vertical industries, that I used to be, CEO for 20 years. I used to always ask myself, well, how remote is remote? right? Is it okay if I put operations in India? Is that too remote? Or should I put some development operations in Europe? Where should I start to diversify my talent? How should I manage that talent? And it was a hard thing to do, but competitively, we all moved remote from our corporate headquarters to branch offices because that's where the talent was and that's where we had to go. Where is today's talent? The young millennials coming out, well, they're everywhere. They don't even have homes right now, apartments. You know, you watch where they live. They spend 1 month here and another month there and another month here. And so the next generation of talent, you almost have to build into your human culture of as a CEO that the talent will be everywhere, all global, which is a great opportunity too. Now you turn yourself to a defender and you go, okay, this is the norm coming, that I will have employees all over this planet. I will have a workforce that is distributed and remote as remote could be. And now how do I defend against that? Because that's our reality that we're going to be in here going forward. And it's just something that, you know, we have to get used to, which we had years to work on. Now we have to work on much faster.
Yeah. And I think in our panel, it was our fireside chat together, Black Hat, Dave, we talked about this too, is, you know, companies are up against nation state threats. Who's going to, you know, and they're outgunned. You know, you've got the entire nation state, you know, we've got militaries that are running these hacker units that are going after and stealing intellectual property from these companies, and they're outgunned. And so, you know, I agree with you. I think, you know, companies need to go out. There's that double-edged sword of needing to go out and find the talent where it's at. That may mean, you know, going out everywhere, including outside the country, and then having to eliminate, you know, we didn't talk about that, eliminating the geo-blocking, right? Because you've got all these workers coming from all over the country or traveling and wanting to work in Italy, wanting to work from a beach in Tahiti, whatever. And you have to eliminate your geo-blocking, you know, so that's opening up more holes in the Swiss cheese. Right. So it's trying to protect everyone everywhere and going where that talent is. I agree.
Hey, so
what you said earlier, Alissa, I thought was such a key. Visibility matters. I've always said this, like, if you can't see it, you can't defend it. And visibility matters. The attack surface and understanding your attack surface, job one. Sorry, John, go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say we have a few more minutes left. We have about 7 minutes left. And there were a couple of questions that came in from the viewers. I wanted to ask two of them. One is, I want a job in cyber ops. Will a certification help me? If yes, what certification can help me get started?
If you guys don't mind, I'll take that first. So I've interviewed many people with all the acronyms after their name, all the Cisco certifications, CCNA, CCIB, and they couldn't tell me the headers of a packet. And so, you know, over time, certifications have definitely lost their luster. Here's my advice. Go out there and study for the CISSP without the intent to get the CISSP, just that process of learning and what you're going to need to do to buy the book for the CBK, read the different modules, understand it. If you don't know what a TCP three-way handshake is, understand reading it. The CISSP is like a mile wide, but an inch thick, right? Don't go out there with the intent of just getting certified, because once you get the certification, that'll get you past the recruiter and HR, but you still have to pass that interview. And I've had so many applicants come in through the door interviewing for a SOC analyst position or a pen tester position, and they have every certification under the sun because they went home, memorized it, went the next day and took the exam, and then forgot it a week later, right? So, you know, don't go out there with the intent of getting the cert. Go out there with the intent of learning. And combining that, yes, I mean, certification, look, if you have certification, that's great. More power to you. I respect you. I've had a GCI, I've had a CISSP, I've had all of these certifications and paid for all the expensive SANS training and all the certs. You have to keep them up. You have to pay every year. They are for-profit corporations. You know, let's be honest here. But the thing you need to remember is it's all about the learning process. It's about learning what you don't know and combining that with hands-on experience in the field. That's my response.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Alissa. You know, I kind of think about the younger generations now in college or even high school, and what an advantage they have coming up,
Yeah.
because I think this is a combination of computer science meets brain science as the future, because
Yep.
social science and social networking and understanding the next 2 decades or more of the way in which we interact and the way in which we, see information, believe information, manage information is, very different than the era I had. And so, certifications and things are interesting to me as as a CEO. But I find some of the smartest people I have are the most logical people too, because they think like an attacker could think, and they think like perhaps this generation of talent that's coming up would think, which is, everything's online, everything's social, everything's cloud. So it's a little different game than even just a few years ago. We're learning.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, my 17-year-old in his high school, they have a Cisco certification course in his high school. Like you could come out of high school with a Cisco cert. It's insane. But yeah, I mean Gen Z, they have no idea how good they've got it. I mean, we didn't have master's degrees in cybersecurity. You can get a PhD in cybersecurity now. It's insane. Like there's so much information available to you and so many certifications and so much training available to you. SecurityTube.net. You go out there and get free training. You don't even have to pay for it. Back then, 20 years ago, when I started hacking, we didn't have this. So there's all of this information available at your at your hands. Just you got to go out there and read and find it, but don't make certifications being the end all be all. It's the learning process.
The fortunate bit in that regard is that there's such a skills shortage that if you put your mind to it, you're going to get a shot. You're going to find a place that will take a chance on you and help teach you and help get you up to speed, because the industry is thirsty for additional people that want to do this thing.
Yep, I can teach you trade, but I can't teach you the passion to want to learn it.
Yep.
One last question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you all for a very illuminating panel from Illusive. What should IT cybersecurity leaders' top priorities be to protect this expanded attack surface? That's a good question.
I'll go back to my comment earlier. It's all about hygiene. Let's just take away the attacker's capabilities let's not, if not for anything else, let's just not make their life easy. They're here to attack us. Let's not help them on the way. And today we're helping them on the way. There's better ways to do it. So as we think zero trust, as we think, I agree and love this thing, identity is a new perimeter. It's really that. Let's just do a better job at protecting those, at getting rid of the stupid, simple stuff that we're letting them take advantage of. That would be my one advice.
Yeah, I would agree. Solve for the cause, not the symptom. Secure the human, secure the data, no matter where it's at. Secure the infrastructure, and don't trust anyone. Don't trust the applications. Don't trust the assets. Don't trust the people. Zero trust.
Yeah, I would just wrap up by saying, sort of east-west traffic is the new north-south, right? Our network has changed a lot. Yeah, there's still north-south traffic, but east-west management really matters, because when you look at every breach and the time to detect an attacker, that matters. And, figuring out the IOC, responding to that IOC, every minute matters in that. So having strong east-west management is really critically important in today's architecture of remote work.
Agreed. Yeah, you can't trust that internal network. It's just as dirty as the internet. So yeah, you gotta have something in place for that east-west traffic. Agreed.
I think that's it. I have more questions, but I think we may have run out of time. Thank you all so much for your thoughts, insights, and thank everyone for attending.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.